Hi, scholars. Welcome to our final lesson in our Kings and Queens unit. And today we're going to listen to another fairy tale called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a very popular fairy tale that you might have heard already. So I want you to listen to see what things are the same or what's something new that you heard for the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There once was a queen who was very beautiful, but she was very vain. She could not bear to think that anyone might be more beautiful than she. The queen had a magic mirror, and she would look into it and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the mirror would answer, "You, queen, are the fairest of us all." And she was satisfied, for she knew the mirror spoke the truth. The queen's stepdaughter was a darling little girl named Snow White. As Snow White grew up, she grew prettier and prettier, and when she was 7 years old, she was more beautiful than the queen herself. So one day when the queen went to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" the mirror answered, "Though you are fair, O queen, 'tis true, Snow White is fairer still than you." When the queen heard this, she turned green with jealousy, and from that moment her heart turned against Snow White. Envy grew in her like weeds, until one day she called for the huntsman and said, "Take the child into the woods and away from my kingdom." The huntsman took the child into the forest, but he took pity on Snow White and told her to run away. As the huntsman galloped away, poor Snow White found herself alone in the woods. She felt afraid and ran as long as her feet could carry her, until at last, as evening fell, she came upon a little house deep in the woods. She went inside to rest. Inside the house, everything was very small, but as neat and clean as possible. By the wall stood 7 little beds side by side, covered with clean white quilts. Nearby stood a little table, covered with a white cloth and set with 7 little plates, 7 knives and forks, 7 little drinking cups. Snow White was very hungry, but she didn't want to eat anyone's whole meal, so she took a little porridge and bread from each plate, and a little sip from each cup. After that, she felt so tired that she lay down on one of the beds and fell asleep. When it was quite dark, the owners of the little house came home. They were 7 dwarfs who worked every day in the mountains, digging with their picks and shovels for gold. When they had lighted their 7 candles, they saw that everything in the house was not the same as they had left it. They looked around and saw Snow White lying asleep in a bed. They all came running up with their candles and said, "Oh, goodness gracious!" She was sleeping so peacefully, they did not want to wake her. The next morning, Snow White woke and saw the 7 dwarfs. They seemed quite friendly, so she told them how the queen had made her leave the kingdom and how she had to run the whole day long until at last she found their little house. Then the dwarfs said, "If you keep house for us, you may stay with us. We will make sure you have everything you need." Every morning, the dwarfs went to the mountains to dig for gold. When the dwarfs were away during the day, Snow White was alone in the house. The dwarfs warned her, saying, "Don't let anyone in the house. Beware of the queen, for she may find out that you are here." And indeed, one day, the queen went to her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the mirror answered, "O queen, you are of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." The queen gasped. She knew the mirror spoke the truth, and that Snow White must still be in the kingdom. She thought of a plan to get rid of Snow White. She went to a dark secret room, and there she made a poisonous apple. It was so big, beautiful, and red that anyone who saw it would long for it. but whoever ate even a piece of it will sleep forever. Then the queen made herself look like a peddler and went across the 7 mountains to the house of the 7 dwarfs. When she knocked on the door, Snow White put her head out the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs told me not to." "All right, I'll go," said the old woman. "But here, let me give you one of my apples." "No," said Snow White, "I'm not supposed to take anything." "Goodness, child, you act like the apples are poison," said the old woman. "Here, look, I'll take a bite of the apple myself, all right?" But the wicked queen had thought of everything. When she made the poisonous apple, she put the poison only on one side, the side that she now held out facing towards Snow White. Snow White looked at the lovely apple and wanted it so much that when she saw the old woman take a bite of the other side, the side without the poison, Snow White could not resist. She stepped outside, took the apple, bit the poisonous part of the apple, and fell down as if she would never get up again. When the queen went home, she rushed to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the mirror answered, "You are now the fairest of all." The dwarfs came home and found Snow White lying there as if dead. They lifted her up and looked for some way to help her, but they found nothing, and nothing they did helped the child. And they sat around her, all 7 of them, and wept. They loved her so much that for many years Snow White lay in the dwarf's home. All the while she never changed, but looked as if she were asleep, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Then one day a prince was riding through the woods. He stopped at the dwarf's house. From there he would see the beautiful Snow White. She was so beautiful that he felt he had to kiss her. As the prince gently lifted Snow White, a piece of poisoned apple came out of Snow White's throat. Snow White sat up and cried, "Oh, what happened?" The prince, full of joy, said, "You are in a deep sleep. I am the prince, and I love you more than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle and be my bride." A splendid wedding was held for the prince and Snow White. Snow White's wicked stepmother, the queen, was invited to the wedding. When she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she went to the mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the mirror answered, "Though you are fair, O queen, 'tis true, the new bride is fairer still than you." The queen screamed with anger. First she thought she would not go to the wedding. Then she thought she had to go and see the new bride. And when she saw the new bride, she recognized her as Snow White, and she was filled with a terrible rage. In a wild fury, she screamed and stomped her feet and jumped up and down as though she were wearing red-hot shoes and ran away and never came back. She never caused Snow White trouble again, and Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. Now, friends, I forgot to add our questions to the end of the story, but they are, what is the setting of the story? So thinking about this picture, what's the main setting? Where does most of the story take place? Who are the main characters in the story? Why is the queen jealous or envious of Snow White? Where did Snow White go to live once the huntsman told her to leave the kingdom? How does the queen learn that Snow White is still in the kingdom? So how does she know Snow White is still there and fairer than she is? How does this make the queen feel? Why did the evil queen want to get rid of Snow White? Were the dwarves able to save Snow White? When they found out she had eaten the poisonous apple, What happened to Snow White at the end of the story? What happened to the queen at the end of the story?